Okay, it's about to dive in, but then I remembered we're doing Scrum. So, so yeah, do you mind starting off what you've done and what you'll do?
Yeah, so yesterday I just made a generic input box and pushed it to my branch. And then I did some TypeScript lessons and I'm almost done with that on Code Academy. So I should be comfortable enough to actually use it.
Awesome.
And then I've been attempting to figure out that line separator on regex this morning. Have had no luck.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's good not to spend much more time on that, and we'll do that other workaround we talked about.
Okay.
So yeah, so I guess that's a blocker. Any other kind of blockers?
I guess if we can kind of talk through more of what needs to be done and kind of put it on the Kanban board. So now that I'm like done or almost done with like learning TypeScript, I can actually do more.
Yeah, excellent.
Because I finished the input box pretty quickly yesterday.
Yeah, it looked good. I ran it, put it up and ran it, so that's good. Yeah, and then for me, I played around a bit. I looked around. I made some more documentation on things that I want to make suggestions on for you to learn, and then I started playing with the testing, but again, didn't get very far. So then I put some things on the list for me to work on, including I want to create an example test. I need to flesh out the requirements a little bit, which is kind of what you mentioned. And then I don't know whether I need to do this or not, or you may do this, but create a demo TypeScript component or convert your component. Maybe make a copy of it and convert it to TypeScript. And I want to show you a little bit about that today. And then, yeah, so that's kind of what I'm up to, and no real blockers.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is I put some more documentation, although it's in my own branch, because I wanted to build it off of yours, although there wasn't a reason to do that, actually. Okay. Let me show you. Although I'm thinking about it, it wasn't necessary. This big old busy screen. So on the README file, I added a few other things. One is just a link to our project, so it's easy to get to under the requirements section. And then I wanted to suggest to start using hooks.
Okay.
Have you played with React hooks yet?
A little bit, not a whole lot.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed using them. And then I want to talk about functions versus classes. I think what you have follows kind of the documentation, which I think they defaulted with classes. And I like functions wherever possible, but we'll talk about when to use them, when not. And it's not a big deal because we can convert them back and forth. But just something to talk through as we kind of decide how we want to do things. And then, so I found a couple of resources for specifically React and TypeScript, because the types do get pretty complicated. So on the typescriptlang.org website, which is the official TypeScript website, they have this kind of playground that goes through some kind of standard examples. So they have this class component, and they talk about how you build it in TypeScript. I don't know if they have a functional component in here. Anyway, so that's kind of handy. And then the other thing was a cheat sheet. And I'm constantly referencing those. So this is also would be some good examples on how to start, the different ways you can start a component. Yeah, okay, so these are functional components. And then later down, they do, I think they do class-based components. Do you know the difference between a function-based and a class-based at all?
I learned very little about functions, but I don't remember it. I know what I learned mostly focused on class components.
Yeah. So the main kind of, so functional components in general are kind of a little bit more reusable, and they often don't have very much logic and very much state within them, which makes them a little bit more reusable. But then classes are where you kind of keep your state and you can have some of your logic. I like to take as much of the logic out of React completely and do it in plain old JavaScript or TypeScript is kind of a philosophy I'm doing, because then later on you can hopefully reuse that in like Node in a backend, or just use it in a plain old JavaScript thing. So I like moving as much out as possible. Now we don't have to worry about that now. We can do that later. So if it's easier to work in a class component with all the state and everything in one place, we could refactor it out later. So that's not a big deal. And I was actually going to say, oh, well, we need to make a separate project so we can reuse this code. And I'm like, no, I'm getting, going way too complicated, way too fast. And it doesn't save that much time. It's pretty easy to refactor things, especially when you are using TypeScript. So these are all things to kind of keep in mind, and that you have some time to kind of look at. It's kind of my philosophy, but we'll be discussing, and definitely none of these things are like hard and fast rules.
Okay.
See, did I add anything else? I think it was just functions versus classes. So this isn't a great link to, like, they don't really explain the difference between the two and why you'd use one over the other. So I might find a better example, but this at least shows you, this is a component, or this is a class base. So it, because it's extending a class. Well, the examples they have above it's just a plain old function, right? Okay. So function, clock, props, and then it uses JSX in here, but outside of that, there's nothing kind of Reacty about it. And so then it's kind of a little bit more reusable, and it's simpler. It's really, you often use just when you want to separate the visual display of how things are built in HTML from the logic. And so there's a lot of philosophies in software engineering that say you need to have a separation of concerns. But a lot of people point out also that rule of separation of concerns, which I can't remember if that's from the Big Four or the Solid framework. But anyways, if they're tightly coupled, like if you can't reuse one without the other, it doesn't matter whether they're in separate files. They're still tight. They're still two concerns. If they're tightly coupled, that's not actually meeting the requirements, which the idea is to kind of make it reusable. So if you're gonna build a class and it has to be used with that one, they have to be used with the other one, then it's not, you're not putting them in two separate files, isn't giving you anything. So it's kind of funny because people used to say, okay, we'll put our HTML in one file and our logic in another file, and it's like, well, that's nice, but there's still you have to use both those files together. So there's no point in separating them. Anyways, but that'll become more clear as we play with it. It doesn't have to make sense at the moment. So what I thought I'd do is I'd show you just a little bit about, I thought I'd play around with converting your, and feel free to stop me at any time. Okay. I thought I would, well, first of all, I guess what we should do is let's run what you've got.
Okay.
Will it work? Of course, I already tested it, so no. Yeah. So and I, as a dev, I like it when I hit run and watch it work. Sometimes I'm kind of like, yes, master of the universe. And then we can test data. Hit a little submit, and an alert pops up. So everything's working great. I like how you went ahead and started by separating that into a separate component rather than building it in the app. So that's good. So we have a separate component called input checkbox, which you might want to do if you have a little time. This isn't important, but we can kind of start stripping out all the kind of base stuff. And that's not a big deal. Any other suggestions? I don't think so. I think that's really good. So if we wanted to start converting this to TypeScript, now I don't remember exactly everything you're supposed to do in here, but I'd have to look at those docs that I just brought up. But the first thing that you can do is rename this to instead of a JS, and I think a lot of times I can't remember if it's supposed to be .jsx if you do a JavaScript with that this HTML syntax in here is I forgot the term now. Anyways, so if you want to do it in TypeScript and if you have that in there, so you can do just TS and then it'll be TypeScript, but in this case it has JSX in it, so it's TSX for the TypeScript version.
Okay.
And then once you change that, it'll start screaming at you, no, you have no types. And we have a setting somewhere in TypeScript that says don't assume types. So we could even turn that off to where these squiggly lines wouldn't appear, but that's one of the benefits of using TypeScript. So if you didn't want to fix everything right now, the quick thing you can do is you can just say this props the type, I'm just going to say any. And that kind of shuts off TypeScript from doing that. So this thing coming in is any here, and then later on you can do a search for any and then fix all of these.
Okay.
Now I couldn't actually figure out how to say this dot state is any because state is not defined here. I tried, and I'm still playing with TypeScript. I thought you could do any here, but it doesn't like that because you're not defining a new type here. Anyway, so a way to get around this if you need to is you can put in a little comment that says, hey, TypeScript, ignore this for now. So it's // at, and then in Visual Studio Code, it's the TS ignore.
Oh.
And then if you do that, it'll ignore just the next line. And then later on, we could search for all the TS ignores and fix them. And you can see how this file is red right now because I still have one more error in here. And you can go to this problems tab. I don't know how much you've done this in VS Code, and take you to the line where the problem is. And you can, this even works within JSX to where you can, but you do have to put it kind of on a separate line to get it to work. So you just kind of make a different line. And then with all of that, it's technically TypeScript that's it's working around it, but it should, did I not leave it running? Failed to compile. Oh, so the other thing I need to do. Now, it looks like I'm doing this pretty quick, but it actually took me like 20 minutes to figure it all out because I was looking up what's the TypeScript ignore.
No.
So don't think I like knew all this stuff off the top of my head. Google is your friend, or in my case, DuckDuckGo. In this case, what was the problem here? Input box. Should still find it. Input box.
It's looking for .js. Is that the issue?
Well, actually, you know what? It did. It looks like it did find it. I guess you just yeah. Oh, it just had to restart it. No, because it yeah. What's interesting about that is it doesn't have the and something that I think they're thinking on changing at some point. It doesn't have anything here, so it should find it. I think that sometimes in TypeScript and JavaScript it'll just work, but TypeScript has that compile step. So a couple times you'll have to just kind of restart it.
Oh yeah.
So redo the compile. I haven't quite figured out all the times you need to do that. So that's a quick and dirty way to convert it. Well, it's not really converted, but at least it runs, right? So as you convert, you could do it. And then we would look at kind of the suggested. Let's see. To read me. Let's make it look pretty. See if this playground says props. That's interesting. It says extends that, but I don't think that's very specific. Let's see if they have. None of these look familiar to me. Functions on it. I mean, when you're saying extends and you're doing an empty thing, I think
Mhm.
that's kind of cheating as well. Doesn't feel like you're doing much there. And actually, and that's a functional component. When we're a class component. So we could say props extends. So you have React dot component. Oh, so this is just defining the interface. So I don't know, in Java, do y'all have interfaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's just kind of like saying, oh, this is the shape of the object I'm going to create later. So you're starting to get really specific. So this is where you're writing a lot of code to do TypeScript that you wouldn't normally need. So you say, okay, these are my props. React.fc, they said they don't suggest using this. So I think they're just giving an example of what they suggest not to do. TypeScript. Yeah, we might have to look around on how to convert it further. But if you wanted to just start converting off, the main thing to kind of know is how to use these TS ignores and the NEs just to kind of get it running. And then you can convert little piece by piece. So that's just kind of the tip that I wanted to get out. But yeah, what we doing is you usually define an interface for your props up here rather than doing any. And I guess we could, yeah, interface. Is it not equals? What is it? You can see it's been a while since I've written an interface from scratch. A lot of times I'm using some boilerplate. Export interface props. No equal sign. It's just, this is it. I don't even know if you need the semicolon or not. They didn't have it in their example. Interface props.
One second, I'm gonna let my dog out of the room. He's whining.
Yeah, go ahead.
He could hear that Kusha opened the treat jar for his dog, so he decided he didn't want to be in here anymore. Yeah, he did not want to be in here anymore.
Yeah, so now I've defined it to be this props, and I guess we're not taking anything in, so that's okay. It's just empty. And then when you use state,
So that interface is just to define that props is props. That's all it's for.
If you want to pass a property in here, you could say info from parent. It's just something, and then you'd say what its type is. Let's say it's just a string. and then later on you could use this dot props dot super props. Is it just props? It's just props. You don't need this info from parent. So then now it's telling me the things that I put on it on here, and then I could use it either in here or down in the render function if I wanted to just like display something from the parent. So like if we wanted to, we could do I have to think about why the props. Oh, did I do this again? Bad habit. Props dot. Oh, I'm out of practice. Because props is not in this function, it's defined in here. Oops. I'll have to remember how to pass down props to the other thing. But also the thing is that this was written in kind of the older thing, and I'm used to using. Yeah, what we'll probably want to do is kind of rebuild it or convert it using the examples that I gave you rather than doing it all right now. But that's some tips that you might find useful. Let's talk about what I was planning on doing. A little bit more detail about my tasks. And then we can add your tasks as well. The task list. All right, so I had create demo TypeScript component, but I don't know, it might be easier for you to do that when you're kind of going through the links I added.
Okay.
So we can see whoever, gets to that first. I'll go ahead and create a test, and then I'll try and flesh out the requirements a little more. So do you have any tasks that, so you've actually already done that. Let's move it to done.
So then should I work on converting it not just to TypeScript, but to a functional component?
Yeah, so let's yeah, let's do convert input box to TypeScript function. Yeah, and then but let's do it separately to try using the trying to remember which hook it is, state hook. And I'm being inconsistent between dashes and colons.
It's fine. Still can read it.
Feel free to edit that if you want. Okay. So I had a link to hooks. And in here, oh, I don't know if that's using the state hook. So you want to go straight to the using the state hook. Right? I mean, you could read all that background if you want. It is kind of helpful, but basically you use import use state. And I think the imports are a little different between React and, between TypeScript and regular JavaScript. So it may be easiest for you to create a new component using kind of a standard TypeScript template and then just move your code over. That may be a little easier than and then you can look at the differences rather than trying to convert it. So feel free to go whichever way you feel is more comfortable. And this is a functional component that they're doing. So this would be a good example to use. Well, this isn't TypeScript actually. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah, so for TypeScript, do I need to import anything for TypeScript? I haven't.
Actually, these imports might be the same. You
Okay.
definitely have to do imports. I thought there was a slight nuance difference, but this does actually look exactly the same as my TypeScript one. So maybe I was wrong there. I'm probably thinking.
Okay.
It's been so many changes. Sometimes I have old differences in mind.
Okay.
But it's nice because you can just use this function, use state, and you destructure. I don't know if you've learned about kind of destructuring right now. Do you know what I mean when I say destructure? That's kind of new.
I don't know what you mean when you say destructure.
Okay, so you're calling this function. This function is returning an array of items. And instead of saying, oh, this variable equals this, then go in and have another line and say this equals this part of the array and this equals this part of the array, you can just put bracket and then name the two variables that you want. So it's taking the result of this function and destructuring it to these two variables instead of just one. So it saves a couple lines of code, looks a lot cleaner. So that's what you'll see. Hopefully I'm using the right term. I remember it's that's not a very good example, but yeah, I think it's destructuring is the term. Destructuring. Yeah, let unbuild equals 1 to let the first and second equals in that input, and it just takes that array and whoop, whoop, puts them right in the variables you want, rather than having to do 2 lines. Yeah. So you'll see that shortcut a lot. What was I saying? Oh, but use state is nice because you can just say use state and it makes its own one. And then later on, you can just use this set. So this set count is the second item in here. Whenever you do use state, this is the actual variable you can use. So it's used here. And then this is the function you use to update that variable. And then you use set count and do that. And in the old way, in the way that you were doing it in there, you have this big state object and you do all the permutations on that. And in the use state, you tend to have a whole bunch of little state objects that are unrelated and use state on it. So rather than having a complex one, you kind of separate each kind of variable or each thing into their own use state statement. Yeah, you might watch a couple of the videos and they'll get you caught up on there.
Okay.
But yeah, and if any of this is like, if you get that, it's a lot of changes and a lot of concepts I'm throwing at you. So feel free to just, do part of it. If you don't, like you could even do the hook part first before you do the conversion to TypeScript. So one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess that's all I really wanted to share. I'll try. No, actually, I had one other thing. So let's get all this out of the way. No, we're not going to say much. I'll take that out later. I noticed that, and I hadn't decided yet which way we wanted to go. So right now, this is a subfolder, which is good in a way because when we add in the node one, then that could be another folder in here. And then when we add in the generic kind of JavaScript utilities that's used by both. Another way to do it is have this be the parent thing and put the test data in it, and then have a whole separate repo for those. And that gets a little complicated, and that's the way I've done it on other ones. And so you then have 3 separate repos, and then you can kind of point them to each other. So this is what they call a mono repo, because you have like 3 different projects within the same repository. And there's not a reason for one over the other. If we wanted to keep it like this, we might just change this to be a website, because it's already under the Zoom chat formatter. I guess it comes down to, do we really expect people to use the JavaScript code that we're building that's not part of React and not part of NPM someplace else? So if we want to make it easy for people to reuse that, then we'd make that a completely separate repo, so they can just pull that repo in and start using it. They don't have to worry about all this other cruft. I think we'll eventually do that, but for now, we'll keep it simple. But so what I'd like to do is have you go ahead and move all this code. So go ahead and take out this folder, put the test folder under, we might make a components, a test folder under here, under source, and then put the test data folder underneath that. And then, so kind of, am I making sense at all?
Right, so take out Zoom chat formatter folder.
Yeah, take everything out of there. I'll just do it. Of course, I'm doing this in Windows and you're on a Mac, but so it'll look different. But and I can't find where I am in the in my tree over here. Windows made it so complicated. Yeah, so we move all this out underneath the main folder. And then we delete Zoom chat. Oh, you can. I can't. You know what? It'll goof up if you have your Visual Studio Code open. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Why is it recycling a whole bunch of stuff? I guess because I did npm install. For some reason, I didn't move the npm folder. Anyways, so yeah, so now everything. That's funny. I'm showing you all this. I'm going to make you redo it, but yeah. Yeah, so now everything's in that top folder, and then the test data. Oh, look at that! I deleted the source folder. We didn't need source. Why? Who cares about source? Yeah, and then just put test data. So it would be like source tests, test data. Now, naming is hard. This is the way I'm doing it. When you go to other projects, where they put their test documents and how they do that will be different. So don't take this as a rule. And I'm probably breaking several rules. And there's probably, if people are watching this, probably going, no, never do it that way. But there's not a great, as far as I know, it, naming convention. I was looking up, so where do most people put their tests in React? I think a lot of times they're testing components, so they probably put it next to the component. But we're creating functions that have no React in them, so they don't belong in the function. So it's like there's probably a utilities folder at some point. So I'll play around with that. But yeah, let's go ahead and move it up. And right now we'll do everything in the website, and then later on I'll show you how to break it out when we want to use it in the back end.
Okay.
Just to keep it simple. And feel free right now if you want to go ahead and keep it. I think even if it's a function, you can still have logic in the this is the top readme, and then I probably even overwrote the readme that I did. No, it's still there. Okay, good. that set everything back? Yeah, set everything back.
There it
Oh,
is.
sorry. Good thing we have source control. What was I saying? I lost my place. Anyways, oh yeah, so you might be able to have some logic in your, go ahead and feel free to put the logic in here, then we'll show you how to, in your input box thing, and then we'll break it out later. So
Okay.
don't worry about doing it in the right place yet. And if you're doing the function and you can't figure out where to put the logic, then
Mhm.
you might leave it as a class component. Feel free to do that and then we can
Okay.
figure that out together. Although this is probably well, if you want to, I guess the first step I think is let's actually have you reorganize the folder to that. So let's have you. Oh, yeah, okay. Reorganized folders. Probably do that one first, and then go ahead and do a pull request to the main branch. Have you done
Okay.
many pull requests?
Yeah.
Do a pull request to the main branch, then I'll approve it. We can just get in the habit of doing that. Although we don't need to be that strict about it. So if we just want to save time, feel free to like work in the main branch because it's just us two, but it's probably a good habit. And I guess we'll probably be using Git flow unless you have a, so this is just, I don't know, have you heard of Git flow yet?
I have not. No.
All right, so it's just a process on a team agreement on how we're going to keep track of our repos.
Okay.
And so Git flow, I'll put a link on the thing again, and on the README. And I guess I'll move the README into the main one. But it's basically saying, oh, anytime I'm working on something, I'm gonna create a branch separately, and then I'll do a pull request back, and someone will approve it. So it's the process of how you do pull requests and how you do. This one, I think the Atlassian Bitbucket one's a nicer demo. So so it's, I make a branch and then I do a pull request back. So it's just the rules around that. And it doesn't matter which set of rules you use as long as the team agrees. This one's a little, except this was safer because you tend to make branches and stuff. And some of the stuff you won't need to worry about is hotfix branches, because that's if you have a production app running and you have to make a slight change, that's called a hotfix because it's hot. But you don't need to worry about that because that gets pretty complicated and stuff. But general Git flow, I think this would be a good link. So I'll do that. What I'll do is I'll move my changes from the README into the main branch. And when you do a pull request, it'll merge in. But if you need to see my links that I added, they'll be in the main branch. We'll do that in a few minutes. And then we'll see. So today's Friday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Losing track of time. So yeah, I just have these meetings on weekdays. But feel free to text me or send anything if you have if you're working over the weekend and if you get stuck. Don't spend too much time spinning your wheels. But feel free to work or not work. And then I guess our next meeting's Monday. Do you have any questions or anything?
No, I think you addressed my questions.
Awesome. Well, good work so far. Got a text box. Got it working.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. And then we'll talk Monday.
All right. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.